Hello, Chris here. So I was a teacher and still am a teacher in many ways. And one of the things, and it's actually on my tattoo, that I truly believe in is teaching with love. That would be my philosophy for teaching, philosophy for life. And there's something when you're a teacher called in loco parentis. So this means in place of parent. And I take that very seriously. When I was teaching, that was something that was very important to me, was that when a parent gives me their child or a caregiver, whoever that person is, they're trusting me to not only teach them, but care for them, to love them. And it's all about relationships. So for me, teaching was almost 100% relationships. Yes, there is curriculum and there is stuff that you need to teach them, wisdom you need to impart, but that cannot start until you have a relationship with the student. Students don't learn if they don't trust you. Yes, you can do rote memorization, but you will never actually retain that information. And so the biggest thing is mutual respect. And that has to be genuine and that has to be real. You actually have to respect your student or whoever it is you're teaching. And these aren't just tips for teaching in a classroom. We are all teachers all the time in life. And so it's having that mutual respect. So there is no, difference between a teacher and a student. To me, we are all just humans. And yes, there is a power differential because that is the structure of our education system. And we're working within that structure. And so yes, there are certain boundaries that should not be crossed. Your students are still your students, and until they are grown-ups and graduated, you can't be friends with them. You are still their teacher. But that doesn't mean that there is not a mutual respect, and that has to go both ways. There is no, to me, difference in power as a human being, just within the structure of the system we're set up in. One of the key things is never ask them to do something you would not do yourself. And I mean anything. So if you are teaching elementary and you are asking your students to do some silly dance, you better be willing to do that silly dance yourself. When I was a student teacher, What Does the Fox Say was the big song, and so I learned dance moves to it so that I could do it with my students. And that was one of the first things I did with them in phys ed class, and it was one of the first things that won them over. If you ask your students to wear a silly hat on Silly Hat Day, you better be wearing a silly hat yourself. Don't say for a student to do something unless you will do it too. I had a student when I was teaching high school at what people consider to be the worst high school in our city. People, when I said where I worked, would go, "Oh my God, are you okay?" It was amazing. I loved the school. I was never worried about that kind of stuff. But a student said to me, "You are the only teacher no one talks smack about." That is probably the highest compliment I have ever received in my entire life. I will never forget that, because that means a lot. That means that the work that I put in was paying off, that my students were trusting me, and that is key. Is you need them to trust you, but you need to give them reason to trust you. And one of the things is I never called anybody else into my classroom, an assistant principal or a principal, unless there was an actual safety concern. Handle it yourself. Classroom management needs to be handled yourself. If you call somebody else into your classroom, you have automatically lost any authority. So don't do it unless you have a safety concern. Then do it. Don't say it if you don't mean it. That goes for anything in your classroom. If you do say something and you have to take it back, apologize and own it. Don't say things you cannot do. Be a trusted adult, because you may be the only one that they have. there are many students where school is the only safe place they have. At the end of the day, my favorite supervision was to be in the rotunda, because when I was in the rotunda, I could see all the students, even the ones that I didn't teach. I could work with them and I could talk to them and I could meet my students' friends and partners and all of that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, there were students who we always had to kick out. It was like, Kate, you gotta go home, because home wasn't necessarily a safe space for them, and school was that safe space. And so they want to be there with you and they want to trust you. So you need to be that trusted adult. So if you guys follow me, you know that I've a series of endocrine, autoimmune, and genetic disorders, and I am sick, and I probably only have a few years left, and so I can't teach anymore. I went from teaching in person, high school cosmetology, to social studies, and then to online learning as I got sick, and teaching from home for a few years, and I loved all of it, every single minute of it. Well, maybe not every single minute, most of them. And when I got sick and I was considering leaving the first time, my learning leader said to me that, stay as long as I could, because I was having some cognitive deficits and I was repeating lessons and things like that. But one of the things he said was, it's the relationship you have with the students. It's not necessarily the content that the students come to your class for, right? So be authentic. Just be you. I came in with all my tattoos exposed and openly queer, just me. And students respond to that, because if you are authentic, it gives them the space to be authentic too. So if you talk about, your life in an acceptable way, with boundaries, obviously, then they respond to that. And they feel like they can trust you if you trust them. So if you trust them with, information that, makes you a little bit vulnerable, they feel the space is there for them to be vulnerable too. And that's really important. So be personal, but not too personal. You still have to have boundaries, obviously, but be genuine, and they will be genuine. Know your audience. So who are they? One of the first things I do is a little form about who they are. What kind of TV shows do they like? What kind of food do they like? What kind of music do they listen to? I give my students a piece of paper, I pass it around the classroom, and I let them put whatever kind of music they wanted on there. And then if they can find a clean version of it, we'll play it in the classroom. And music was a huge part of my classroom, especially when I was teaching cosmetology. But even with my other classes, when I was teaching social studies or psychology, we'd often have music at the beginning and the end. But know who your students are. Who are their friends? On supervision, let them introduce you to their friends, their partners. If their parents come by to pick them up, meet their parents. Know what they like. Get to know them as humans and know their names. That's a really big one. Is sometimes there's teachers who don't know their students' names. And yes, it can be hard to know a lot of names, because sometimes you'll have hundreds of students if you're teaching high school. But do your best to know as many of their names as you can. Food. Food is huge. Bring food. Sometimes there's organizations within schools that will help fund the food. Most of the time I just paid for the food out of my pocket. I usually budgeted $1,000 or more a year out of my own pocket to pay for classroom stuff, but that was my choice. Reward them. So most parents only get emails or phone calls home when their kid's done something wrong. Grandparents, caregivers, whoever is taking care of this human usually only gets bad news. Don't do that. Send home good news too. Talk to parents or caregivers and say, hey, I just want you to know that your child has all of their work turned in. I'm so impressed. Or I just wanted you to know that they did amazing on this project. Have you had a chance to look at it? It's a lot of work, yes, but it makes a massive difference to that child's life when they come home and, their whoever says, hey, your teacher contacted me, and they're going, ooh, oh no. And they're like, no, it was good. They were telling me all this good stuff about you. That is really, really impactful. Sometimes rewarding them will be things like, I would have gift cards. So if I would have some sort of competition or whatever, and then students could get a gift card as a reward. It cost me $40. I do, like a $20 gift card, a $10 gift card, and a couple $5 gift cards or whatever to Starbucks, Chapters, whatever it was. Even when I was doing online teaching, I would do digital versions of gift cards and send them out and reward students. And it really does work. It's a $5 coffee that they got, but they remember that. Play with them. Music, games, clubs, run clubs, and you can get to know students that you will never teach. It is amazingly fun. Music was a huge thing. We would often, when I was doing cosmetology, we would just be working on mannequins and having music play, and then all of a sudden a song would come on and there would be a bunch of different people singing at the same time. So much fun. Just play, have fun with them. A really big thing is don't bullshit them. Be authentic, and you will have no classroom management issues, or much less classroom issues. So Maya Angelou said, people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. My objective as a teacher was, yes, to teach the curriculum and to have my students learn. And there was evidence. My students did well on their exams. They could write the same exam as another class and do just as good or better. So my teaching methods work. There's evidence to show that. But it's about how you make them feel. That's what they're going to remember. They're not going to remember, what so-and-so did on such and such date. We can Google that. That's super easy. Facts are not really that important anymore. It's understanding why something happened. And that's an emotional thing. And to remember an emotional thing, you need to be emotionally tied to it. So for my students to feel that emotional connection to the content, they need to feel that emotional connection to me. And it works. And we're all teachers. So just because I don't have a physical classroom or a virtual classroom anymore doesn't mean that I'm not a teacher, and it doesn't mean you're not a teacher. Whether you were actually a teacher listening to this or somebody else, a coach, a parent, a human, we are teaching all the time. And if we teach with love and care and we're authentic, you can never go wrong. Thank you for listening. Much love.